Hello, all. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in to what will be ideally just the first episode of Conversations with My White Allies. Um, I like to do a thing called Speaking My Mountains, which means telling people what's going on internally for you. Uh, I'm nervous. I don't know why. It's awkward to do this in front of people that I know and that I know well. So we got that out there. Now I think I'm probably good to go. Um, the goal for starting the series and how we move forward is just to have some enlightening and uncomfortable conversations and share them. They will be between myself and folks that I consider allies. While thankfully the Black Lives Matter movement is alive and well, and I hope that it continues to be exactly that, I will throughout the series be inviting allies for all causes and all underrepresented groups because those conversations are just as important to me. So with this, like myself and my guest will basically bounce questions back and forth, questions that we've been wanting to ask one another, whether it be, I think for this one specifically, a Black person, or for me, a white ally. We'll answer those questions openly, honestly, and ideally unfiltered. Let's try to just be as off the cuff as possible. There's no ground rules for this as far as the questions go. The ground rules are for answers only, and that we will respect one another, we will disagree respectfully, and ideally we will aim to leave the conversation better than we entered it. And I think that's really all we can ask for right now. All right, so all that said, I'm joined by two folks that I feel strongly are allies in several arenas. The first is my colleague and friend, Virginia. Virginia is a technical program manager. I probably meant technical program manager. That's the correct title. I had the pleasure of joining Help Scout with her on the exact same day. So we were buddies in that. And since then, I've been learning so much from her about what it is to be human and empathetic. And I'm just really in awe of her allyship. So Virginia, just to give us like a few connectors, can you tell us where you're from, where you live, and tell me something that I guess brings you joy?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small farming town about a half hour outside of Portland, Canby, Oregon, and now I live in Portland. Maybe the interesting thing to understand is Portland is super liberal progressive, the rest of the state is not. What brings me joy? Partner, family, cats, really good long walks around the city with amazing graffiti.
Nice, nice. Well, I appreciate you joining. I am so excited to ask you questions and have other people hear your perspective. So thank you so much. My other guest is a former colleague and current and always friend, Seb. We worked together for, I think it was about a year, maybe a little bit more. I think when we kicked off our friendship was just like super honest, open conversation about everything, which I always appreciate. Like, I don't want to work too hard for a relationship. I just want it to I wanted to be there immediately, and that was there. So I've been since then and will be forever impressed by his desire and willingness to learn and ask tough questions, certainly with regard to DEI. So Seth, I'll ask you the same. Tell me where you're from, where you live, and something that brings you joy.
Sure. Originally from Germany. I've been not living there for over 10 years now. Right now, I live in a smallish town called Squamish, north of Vancouver, BC in Canada. And the reason I live there is also the things that give me joy, which is spending time outdoors and spending time with people.
Okay, perfect. I probably should have led with like no assumptions that anyone watching this knows who I am or where I'm from or what brings me joy. So My name is Morgan Smith-Lanyard, and I work in people operations at Help Scout. I am from San Diego, California, or San Diego County. Shout out Escondido, North County area. I currently live in Columbia, Missouri, which is right smack dab in the middle between the two hubs, St. Louis and Kansas City, Missouri. And joy, that's that term. Kiddos, depending on the moment, I've got two young ones. And when they are not bringing me joy, a good glass of red wine often does that. So with that said, Seb, I know you mentioned that you live in Canada, and that's an interesting segue because this is a worldwide, this Black Lives Matter thing is like a worldwide movement. We've seen it on the news. We see other countries joining us in support and solidarity. But I think there is this grand assumption that like it's a US problem. US had slavery, it's a systemic oppression. That's their thing. We're just supporting it. But I think we all know like it's bigger, right? Like, do you have any sense that there's an understanding that it goes beyond the US?
Well, it's definitely one of the things that has that I've come across with quite a few people lately, mostly white people that, like me, are confronted with this conversation around racism, and because it's a difficult thing to be confronted with, a lot of people opt for the easy way of, oh yeah, this is a US problem, especially considering the current political climate and the current government and sentiments towards that. It's easy to just point at that and be like, oh yeah, this is a problem that we don't have to deal with. And I'm in the process of educating myself around that, what that means from a Canadian perspective. And Sandy and Nora Talking Politics is a podcast that's been really helpful for me to develop a better understanding. It definitely is a problem that exists here in Canada as well. It has a slightly different shape. It affects slightly different groups of people, but it's definitely one of those things that exists here as much as it exists in the US.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I appreciate you also like providing a resource. I think that is key because people need those opportunities to learn more in the areas that like they don't have that knowledge. So thank you for bringing that up. I guess we'll jump in with the questioning, like if everybody feels good about that. Cool. So I'll kick it off. I've been having a lot of conversations recently, just with like friends, people who have been allies for a long time, people who are new in their allyhood. Like I'm trying to figure out all the verbiage. New in their allyhood. And I think one of the questions that has struck me recently, just because there's so much happening, is do white allies require Black support? And I'll provide a little bit of context to that question. I have personally made it a point to like offer myself up. Hey, like if you've got questions, if you know you need information or I don't know backing of some sort to your views, here I am. I'm ready and willing. I know that some Black people are like, not today. Like I'm not doing that anymore. This is your thing to figure out. Which one is in your mind, like which one fuels the movement more? Is it required as an ally? Do you need Black support to push forward? Okay, so I'll go to Virginia first.
Yeah. I think the use of the word required makes me answer this question in a really specific way. I think if you require Black support to start your journey or continue your journey of trying to be an ally, I would question why that's a requirement, because that you're seeking validation, which probably means you're at an earlier phase of allyship. It's normal that we want to have like an endorphin loop, and like you do something, you get feedback that you're doing it well. But I think in this case, that ends up being an extra burden that's not really fair. And I think where it has come across as more problematic for me is you can search so many things on Google, like just long search strings, and usually you land on a resource that at least helps get you thinking. So I think if you have folks in your life who are not white, who identify as BIPOC, who want to be there to support you and help you, and they invite it, that feels fantastic. Like I know, Morgan, in our work setting, you've invited it, and I've really admired that. I've admired that you have this tremendous emotional capacity to support all of these folks around you. But that's not something I want to take for granted. I'd rather get very comfortable researching, putting something out there, and being very open to accepting feedback if I get it wrong after trying to get it right, and being willing to try it again.
Perfect. You use the term BIPOC, just for anyone who's very new in their allyship. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, Black, which is umbrella term for those who identify as African American or other history of Black, like Black Dominican. This is very big. Indigenous is the I, and POC, person of color, which most commonly you'll think of Asian immigrants, Latinx, and so on.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Seb, what do you think? Is it necessary? Do you feel like you need Black support in your allyhood?
Yeah, I think I definitely I definitely agree with what Virginia was saying around the importance of require. I agree the requirement should not be there, as white people trying to get a better understanding of the inequality, the level of oppression, the impact of racism, and the areas where like everyday behaviors can be small microaggressions or small elements of racism. Those are all things that we can learn and educate ourselves without needing a Black person or a person of color giving us that information.
Yeah.
I think required in the sense that the source of information does need to come from a person of color or from a Black person. So having authors that are from that group sharing their perspective and learning about their life experiences from that perspective is really important, because that's a frame of reference that we don't have as white people, that we will never have as white people. And so to learn about that, we need that level of support. But we don't necessarily need the direct support of individuals to actually educate us. I would expand that a little bit and say, in terms of understanding better in the long, or learning more effectively in the long term, we also need to break out of those bubbles that we have, especially growing up in white communities, predominantly white communities. As a German, there was no Black people where I grew up, which is 25, 26 years of my life. Predominantly white communities. And I think we do have to break out of that and develop relationships with a diverse group of people to be able to have a more diverse understanding of other life experiences and perspectives. Yeah, I think that's kind of.
Okay. Yeah, I find that interesting, like to me, even more so than like the breakdown of requirement, I think the breakdown of the word support itself. I always feel fine if someone is like, here's what I want to do, here's what I want to say, here's what I've researched, and like, but I don't have the experience. And like, what I want to share with my other white friends is an experience that really ties everything that I'm bringing informationally to the forefront. That's different to me than like, I don't understand systemic oppression. Can you explain it to me? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to continue providing that sort of support long term. Because much like Virginia said, like, Google is your friend. And I expect you to use it as often as possible. So I would expect, like, for me personally, I would expect my support to be a last resort in those instances. I've read 10 things, didn't get it, and now I want to ask you. Whereas on the other side, I've read 10 things, got them all. I've got what I want to say down, but I'd like a personal experience, and I can't bring that to the table. Like, that's a different level of support for me personally. So, yeah, I think to me, you both have sort of like hit the nail on the head where that's concerned. All right, let's go Virginia. What question do you have on the plate?
Yeah, I feel like this piggybacks off of this. I noticed over the last week and a half or so, especially on social media, I saw white people proclaiming that they have ally fatigue or allyship fatigue. And when I saw it, I had a very harsh reaction. And then I had a friend text me that that's how they were feeling, and I had an even harsher reaction. So I dug in because I was like, I don't even know the history of this term. Is this new?
Yeah.
It's not new. It comes from the disabled community, and it was the disabled community basically pointing at able-bodied people saying, like, you're just tired of caring. So it made it even more fascinating to me that this term that has a very specific origin has now been appropriated in this weird way that just kind of feels like people saying something that is uncomfortable. So I was just curious what you both thought. If you've heard the term, what your thoughts were. I can't hear anything other than I'm tired of caring about another human when I hear about it. And that's different than, I've had 10 really tough conversations and I need one day of a break from tough conversations, where I would be like, yeah, I get that. You should also like nurture yourself. But yeah, would love to hear your two thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I love that you mentioned that there is a history to the term ally fatigue. I had been using it without knowing that there was a term to it. I think I've even on my Instagram, I would tell people like, hey, I know you're fatigued. I get it. I see it. It's a lot of information. You're still trying. It's tiresome. I'm trying to find a filtered way to say this, but it's supposed to be, I guess, unfiltered. If you are an ally, just don't give a fuck about how tired you are. We're tired. I'm exhausted. This is, it's not new. If you're new to the party and you're already exhausted, then you're not the ally that you thought you were. If you're just jumping in and you're realizing that this is hard, buckle up. It's gonna get harder. The conversations aren't easy. Calling out people that you thought were friends, that are family, realizing that your circle is getting smaller, it's uncomfortable. At the same time, I do realize that I have friends, allies who are like going super hard. Like they're just like all in it and they feel like they need to respond to every message. They see someone post something that's shitty, like they're gonna come in and jump in with the facts. And like the term fatigue, I get that's exhausting. It's exhausting to be like, I need to jump on everything that's happening. And so what I would say to that is like, certainly if you're new to it, guard your mental. like, guard your mental, because it's the only way that you stick it out. It's the only way that you are an ally long term. If you get exhausted now, you respond to every message, you hit every racist that you're confronted with the facts and information, and you're reading shit all the time, like, you are going to use a tech term, burn out real quick. You're going to burn out, and you're going to be like, F it, there's nothing else for me to do. This is a problem. It's been here for hundreds of years and it's not going away. I'm going to take a back seat. And that's not what we need. So to answer your question, allyship fatigue is real. To answer it deeper, I don't care.
Thank you.
Either you're going to show up for people and you're going to say that I care, and I care so deeply that, like, even when I'm tired, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in a way that guards my mental, but I'm still going to show up for people because I care about human life. It's just that, period, nothing else. So that was maybe deeper than I wanted to go, but that's how I feel. Yeah, I don't want to put any pressure. Does anyone have an additive to that long tangent?
I think I do, because I think one aspect, especially as a white person, that's really interesting in that is that we as white people have the privilege of deciding to opt out of the conversation, because the racial conversation is not something that we are confronted with by default. So there is a lot of privilege in saying, well, I'm tired, I'm just gonna go over here.
Yeah.
And I mean, I appreciate your perspective around saying, like, take care of your health and your mental health, because that's also important. But if I would say doing that also requires a certain level of additional awareness that the only reason you get to do that is because you have that privilege. And most people don't have that.
Yeah, that's real. I just and I don't want to stay on one question for too long, but I find myself wanting to turn it off. Like, I was talking to a coworker recently. I was just like, I'm gonna get off Instagram. I'm gonna get off Facebook, and I'm not gonna respond to anything else. I'm gonna take the weekend off. And then I was just like, I just couldn't. I was just like, I know it's happening. I know it's there. And even if I just want to see, like, the good, I just want to go on Instagram, like, see some cute baby pictures or something, like, inundated with the shit. And it was like, I can't turn it off and I can't ignore it. So yeah, the ability to do that, must feel nice. I don't know. I haven't been there. So, but yeah, no, that is that's a real response. Yeah, there's a privilege to being able to cut that off. All right, next question. That's a long time there. That was Virginia's question. Let's do Seb. Yeah, I'm sure you've got a question.
I do. So talking about this this conversation of white people, us educating ourselves, engaging in conversation, not being silent, is something that's top of mind, I guess, within this context. One of the things that I've become more and more aware of is there's a lot of things that I don't know. There's a lot of things that I don't understand yet. And there's a requirement for me to acquire that knowledge. But as I'm engaging with people with this incomplete knowledge, whether that's Black people, people of color, other white people, or in public discourse, I'll make mistakes. We will all make mistakes, and some will be bigger mistakes and some will be smaller mistakes. but all of these mistakes, especially with Black people or BIPOC individuals present, can hurt those people, can cause pain, trauma, can trigger individuals specifically around that. And I'm wondering, what are the negative impacts potentially of making those hurtful mistakes? Are they helping the conversation? Are they hurting the conversation? What are your perspectives on that?
So, oh yeah, like failure here is inevitable. Again, like we were just talking, like if you don't have the experience, there's no way for you to like speak to it perfectly. And I don't personally expect allies to speak to it perfectly all the time. I expect them to mess up. I expect them to make mistakes. Just to put, I guess, a situation to it. So I was recently having a conversation with some like people ops and culture leaders in tech and in the remote space, and we were talking about sort of pivoting your organization towards remote work if you hadn't been there yet. And one of the questions that had been asked was like, what has changed for your organization and your employees' needs with regard to the global pandemic and COVID-19? And one person that was a part of that conversation, and I like that they turned it to this, like, hey, global or civil unrest in the U.S. as well is an issue for us as a company. But it wasn't framed in that way. It was framed as the riots in the U.S. Have really deeply impacted our employees and their needs, etc. That frustrated me. That is a shift in narrative, a negative shift in narrative for what's happening. This person quickly, I think, realized their mistake and said, the riots have deeply impacted our the protest. There was a correction. I appreciated the correction. Don't get me wrong. But what we can do even better than that when we mess up as allies, explain the correction. Why was that a mistake? Why was you saying riot wrong? Why did you correct yourself? Why was protest the appropriate term for what's happening? That was the step further that I wanted to see that would have maybe not eliminated my hurt to what was said, because what's already happened has happened. I was hurt by it. But it would have allowed me to move forward without resentment, without, damn, I don't like that. Now I'm questioning you. Like, what are you doing behind the scenes? I don't even know if I could count on you to show up the way that I expect you to. So I feel like when you make a mistake as an ally, the best way to lessen the hurt, really make efforts toward healing it rather than like, let's slap a cheap band-aid on it and go on about our merry ways. Like, acknowledge why your mistake was a mistake so that other people can learn from it and then they know differently too. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. I'm not sure if I did it well.
I think that resonates profoundly with me. I think I'm realizing as we're talking that a lot of things that I'm hearing from, especially like white friends, genuine friends, and friends, acquaintances, right? So just in my network, sometimes I worry, like, are folks looking for excuses? Like, I'm worried I'm going to hurt someone, so I'm not going to say something. And one of the things that's helped me is I've had a lot of opportunity to serve as a leader of teams. And I used to start first team meeting with new team asking about people's favorite childhood memory. And then one day I had an employee explain to me that they were abused as a child. That was a crap question for me to ask. So it's just, we're talking to other humans. We will make mistakes. And I love how you just focused on, like, when you make a mistake, it's more about what happens next. And even understanding that if you take the next step to like acknowledge that you got it wrong and that doesn't resonate with the person, you're not always going to get validation that you made the person feel better. And that's okay too. Like, that's where you just have to be like, maybe we're not there. Maybe we don't have a deep enough relationship that we get to have that harder conversation to like repair bonds. Yeah. And you just take that for next time also.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I thought I had something to add to that, and I just don't. Like, yeah, like take the learning and just like carry it forward and make sure that you acknowledge like why it was wrong and how you learned something in that specific moment. I wanted to keep this to 45 minutes. We're inching really, really close, but I want to ask one more question on my list that I feel I just want to know, because I'm not on this side of things, and it's important for me to understand the difficulties from a white ally's stance. Part of being an ally is having uncomfortable conversations with people that you care about that may not necessarily be on your side of the thinking of what's right or wrong. And I find that people that I thought were allies, a lot of the time, I'll witness them in those conversations. And it's rare that I get to witness it, but when I do, I see them back down really quickly from telling white friends, white family that they want to continue a relationship with, that, hey, what you said there, that was racist, or here's how you could have changed what you just said to not offend or hurt someone. What's the most uncomfortable piece about speaking out against racism in a room full of white people that aren't guaranteed allies? I think we know when we're in a room of guarantees. What makes it difficult when you're in a room that's like, it's not guaranteed? What's hard about that? And I'll leave it up to you. Seb, I think Virginia answered first last. I'll let you go.
Okay. I think from my perspective, the thing that I struggle most with, and especially if we're talking about a group setting, there is a couple of people you don't know the hypothetical person that's not on board, that has an opposing opinion. I think one of the things that I struggle most with in these kinds of situations is not having enough data, not having enough information to back up my convictions, my understanding of the world. Because if I can't, it's hard to argue and win the argument. So I've had conversations with people that are way better at retaining numbers, at retaining reports and the data from those reports. And I've had disagreements with people like that, not just about this conversation, but about conversations in general, where it gets to a point where the person presents me with a lot of information that backs up their point. And I call bullshit on a lot of it, but I don't have the data to back it up. I don't have the ability to present them with the exact same level of detail on the data. Yep. And then you're in a room of people that are looking to you to defend that position. And what you do is you basically get slapped on the wrist for not being able to back up your position, and you're not running out, but you're basically leaving that confrontation as a loser because that other person just has demonstrated a lot more knowledge about their position, has a lot more data to back up their position, and you can't. And so for me, in moments when I struggle to speak up in that moment, it's often around, do I have the data? Do I have the ability to engage in an argument that might end up hurting the perspective in this room of people more than calling out that person?
Yeah. I'll say, just tell me, I mean, I've been there. I've been there frequently where I'm just like, I don't have the facts and figures. And what I've found, the people that are racist, certainly ones I've been confronted with on Facebook recently, well, goddamn, you know how to store some facts and figures about Black on Black crime. You know, like you have facts and figures down. And the only thing I can tell you is personal experience. Like, I can study facts and figures, but I don't want to. And that's like not what we're really talking about. You know what I mean? And so like, but I feel the same way. Like, I find myself in conversations where it's like, I know that they're armed. You're armed with the information to counter because you've thought about this deeply, so deeply that you went to look up figures on Black crime or how many white people have been killed by the police. Like, you felt so deeply that you were gonna at some point enter a conversation where you needed that information handy, that you already have it readily available. And I just don't. And so I'm just like, why? You know, I'm just gonna sit over here and take a time out. So like, I'm not gonna lie, like I do get that argument. I do get it. What about you, Virginia? What holds you back if you've ever been held back from saying something?
Yeah, I'll definitely share that. I am curious, Seb, maybe, like, have you ever tried, why are we making it a conversation about data to begin with? Like, that's the thing that when folks meet me with that, I'm like, ooh, someone is expressing pain. We're going to try to play the quantified pain game.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know that that makes it any easier. I don't think it does, but maybe that's a thought to explore. And I say that also from, like, a lot of my friends are, their brain naturally works very different than mine. And they are very argumentative in a debate style way where it's easy for them to just talk about the stuff in a way that poet brain up here, I can't compute it. So I don't know if that'll help, but maybe that's a strategy around that. Like, wait, why are we having that conversation? And then there's also like, yeah, less white people will unjustly die too if we fix this problem with policing in the United States or whatever other country, as an example. I think for me, it's when someone has power over me, specifically in a work context. That's when I hesitate. I financially help out family. Yeah. There's a real cost there. And I understand that if we look at allyship as a journey and what you're constantly working towards is really being an accomplice. Accomplice means you are willing to risk your own safety, your own life. You're willing to risk COVID to go out and show up and protest and put numbers of humans behind this thing that we support. Not saying that people need to do that. I'm not trying to undermine the pandemic, but just as like a very real example of how you can think about it.
Yeah.
But damn, it's still hard. It's that opening scene in Inglourious Bastards. Like, we can all say, I wouldn't have owned slaves. I wouldn't have been a Nazi. You don't know it until you're tested. You don't know it until you have something at stake, and then it becomes a much harder decision to make. And those are the moments when I've hesitated. Always a work context. In personal life, for a long time, I'm like, at some point, I'm not going to argue with you about things that are true for me. And there's always more friends. There's always more mates and partners that I can meet. There's 7 billion people on this planet. I can choose that. Same with family. I'm not scared to cut family out of my life. Had 2 parents that were more than willing to do that out of necessity, so I had good examples there. Someone has power over me. Sometimes I hesitate. Or I'm like, have I already said 10 things too many? Is this the final straw where now I get labeled as toxic, or I become a pain that no one wants to listen to? And then what?
Right. Thank you for sharing that, first of all. Okay. I know we're getting close. We're getting close to time. So I have a final question for all of these sessions, and it will change every time. I feel like for this one specifically, I don't know, Black Lives Matter seems like the right topic. Black Lives Matter is a movement. It is the movement of the moment. I hope that it is the movement of the foreseeable future. Tell me how you plan to live the sentiment Black Lives Matter moving forward. I will start because I think it's relevant for me to answer as well. I think I was quiet for too long too. You know, it was like a very on and off, not support. I've always been a supporter, but like on and off being vocal about it. I was vocal when it was convenient. I was vocal when something major happened. I was vocal when, like, for me, like, I didn't, you know, livelihood is important. I don't want to say too much at work. I don't want to say too much on social media. And I politely say, fuck that now. Like, I'm going to tell my direct manager, I will tell, you know, the CEO of any company, hey, you messed this up. Here's what it made me feel. I've started a blog that I want to just like broadcast. This is how I feel. I am a Black woman in America. Listen or don't, but it's there. And also I wanna reach out and touch more Black professionals, specifically in the tech space, because I've been in it for a little bit of time. Most of my experiences are very white. Most of the people that I touch are white, and I want to support and elevate Black people in this space as well. And so that's what I plan to do moving forward. What about you, Virginia?
I think a lot of it is about always having something that is hard to do, where it's challenging me and it's pushing me to grow. And like once hard conversations get easy, because at some point they do. At some point it gets very easy to say the thing that felt uncomfortable. Like I challenged one of my favorite places to go in Portland when they were doing a class put on by Maker's Mark. And I was like, that brand is in Kentucky. That makes me a little uncomfortable right now. I'm just going to initiate this conversation. And it has gone exceedingly well. And now we're talking about doing a fundraiser. In the back of my mind, I was like, I might lose one of my favorite places to go. So it gets easier. So once that gets really easy and it's just autopilot, what's the next thing that's hard to do and uncover? But then also, what is something that gives me energy or requires no effort? I'm in tech, I make a good living. Recurring donation, like donated to ALCU, Planned Parenthood. And I've realized over the last few weeks, local donations actually have a bigger impact. So where are the local organizations that I can set up recurring donations? That's zero effort for me. That's a computer remembering to do something on my behalf. Going out and hearing voices in the community, that gives me energy and inspiration and humility, which feels empathy for me. So I think it's a balance of what is hard and what is easy, but always something. Because even can I talk about it, Morgan? Can I talk about Instagram? Seeing posts about yet another man who's 23, his life being taken, and seeing that that's the same age as my partner's sister, who I think of as a kid. Like I just watch her go through where she's at in life, and I'm 15 plus years older than her. And it hit me in a very real way where I just like looked at her and I was like, no, like this is never okay, and extra no, because I'm seeing this person. And Morgan pointed it out. She was like, can't do that. So like even like no matter how much progress you think you've made, there's always something, right? Something to learn, something to do better. So I think it's figuring out how to sustain it the same way that I've sustained climate change, right? Or anything else that I care about. Yeah.
I want to just for clarity's sake, for those listening, because I know you're speaking specifically to me, and we are in a bubble. The situation that Virginia is talking about is she was posting about that 23-year-old man that was killed by police, and I think that the verbiage used was he was dancing. They killed him. They killed a child for dancing. And I think my reaction to that when I messaged Virginia was, oh, this wasn't a child. Let's not sugarcoat it to make it look better, to make people feel something different about it. I think when people think a child, it's like it hurts more, right? It hurts when children die. No, this was a man. This was a Black man. He was 23 years old. He was walking down the streets. He had a mask on. He was dancing. He had headphones on. And he begged for his life as he was being killed by those who were sworn to protect and serve. He was a man. And I need that shit to hurt just as deeply as if he was a child. Yeah. I don't know. Sorry, I'm taking a tangent for a minute. I think that we like to sugarcoat shit as like, oh, if it's a Black child, it's different. They're cute still. They've got life to live. Sometimes that matters to people. Sometimes it doesn't still. Trayvon Martin had Skittles. We like to always say he had Skittles on him when he died. Who cares? Who cares? He was walking home in his neighborhood, rightfully so, and he was stalked and killed. That's all that matters. There's really no other details that are important. His age, yeah. Sorry, I know that I took your answer on a long tangent.
But I think that's why it's
Mike Brown. He robbed a store. There's no real evidence to that shit. But we want to find a narrative that fits people to make it right or wrong.
Well, and even if he was robbing a store, like how is that?
He still deserved to live. He deserved to live.
Yeah, it's
just, I'm sorry. Yeah, I took a tangent off that because you brought it up and it took me somewhere. But I appreciate you bringing it up, and I appreciate, here's how we do things when we want to receive information. Also, back to a question that we talked about before.
Yeah.
Someone points out to you, hey, for me, as someone in this community, I feel like this could have been said differently. Here's why. Here's my information. You receive it. You say, God damn, I hear you. I receive it. I understand why it was wrong. And I'm going to tell other people what I did wrong, which was exactly what Virginia did. So that's how you ally, just FYI. Seb, I probably made your response a little, go ahead, Virginia, sorry.
The point of bringing it up is, if you're not thinking about how this stays in your life forever, you do more of those careless things, right? But if you're constantly trying to dismantle centuries worth of a system, I'm very okay with the fact that I won't see whatever this will lead to in my lifetime. Like the really, really good stuff that could happen as a result of all of this, I probably won't see. And that's okay.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. And said, I went on a tangent, and I feel like I'm going to make your answer like all the more uncomfortable to go through. But like, what do you personally, the question, just to to circle back, was Black Lives Matters is a movement right now. How do you plan to live that sentiment going forward? Black Lives Matter, what do you plan to do to make that real in your life?
There's a lot of things that have been going around in my head since you asked this question for the first time. I think there's a lot of things that I need to do in terms of education, just for myself. As I said earlier, growing up in a country that's predominantly white, or an area of the country, talking about Germany, that is predominantly white. There is a lot more understanding that I have to develop for how things are historically in North America, than someone who grows up here, I think. So there is a lot more understanding for me to develop, and then move forward in a way that I use my white privilege and understand the nuances of the privilege that I have towards supporting Black people and anybody who is part of the BIPOC group in the areas where I have influence. And that includes my personal life, obviously, but it also includes my workplaces. That's one of the places where I'm currently focusing a lot of introspection in terms of what can I do? Where can I engage in conversations? Where can I be the person that points out things that are wrong, or where people are saying racist things, are saying things that maybe don't come from maybe come from a place of lack of knowledge, but are wrong just the same. Doing a lot of the educational work as a white person, pointing out to other white people how we are privileged. I just had a moment yesterday reading a post on LinkedIn where a white man posted the stereotypical things that are always brought up around white people not understanding their privilege. And it sent me raging that there's no understanding of how much privilege we carry, even if we're just talking about good education. I come from a place where education is free. That's a privilege. That's a huge privilege. And all of these privileges around me as a white man, understanding those and making sure that I get others to understand that as well, especially other white men. I think that's where I want to focus a lot of my awareness and my influence on the people that I surround myself with.
Perfect. I love all of that. Please, both of you, I hope that you will continue that work. I hope that you hold to the things that you will do to make sure that Black Lives Matter in your world and the world of others that you know. I'm gonna wrap things up. I feel like we got a lot accomplished right there. I do want to shout out some resources because I want everyone to hear our voices, hear our experiences, hear what we're going to do, but also continue reaching out, continue educating yourself. I want to shout out Melanin Tech. They have a Black Solidarity Resource Directory. And I'm going to link that in the details. It includes organizations to support, to donate to, petitions to sign, mental health resources, literature, all of that, just to name a few. Also, you can subscribe to Melanin Tech to connect with other techies of color all over the world. This is a very near and dear organization to me because I know the founder, Shanita Sims. So please do check them out. Any other resources to shout out?
I I have two that one I mentioned earlier is Sandy and Nora Talk Politics, which is a Canadian centric conversation podcast that especially the last few episodes were really targeting the Black Lives Matter movement and the topics adjacent to that. They talk about defunding the police and what it actually means, how to follow up in terms of political discourse with all of the things that are currently going on. Extremely valuable. And then yesterday I was listening to an episode with Dax Shepard, I think is his name. And he was talking to Ibram Kendi.
Sorry.
And the conversation just explained a lot of the aspects around racism being an ongoing thing that you always have to work towards. Like an addict is it's an extremely good analogy that I can just recommend like indulging in.
I definitely, especially for folks that are wanting to put in deep work and go through some really tough self-reflection exercises, I recommend Layla Saad's book, Me and White Supremacy. It'll take a while to get through. You don't pick it up and put it down in a week. It's probably a few months to get from start to finish. And being very, very mindful to make sure you're buying the book and not purchasing any of the workbooks that she has not created. And it's just people making money off of a lot of hard work that she put into something, which, but you'll do links so we can like give the right link.
Perfect. Absolutely. I will, I'll link all of that in the details, like I said, and I will also link the LinkedIn profiles of both Virginia and Seb, so that if you want to connect with them, you want to ask more questions, you want to chat with them in something similar that you're trying to put out into the world as well, they will be available to you. I think I'm going to end with, if there's anything that I want people to know, it's that when you hear racist rhetoric, you hear stuff that just doesn't serve what we're trying to do as a whole, you have the right to just quote Rosa Parks and just say, nah, not today. We're not doing that. Here's why. You don't have to fit any facts, data, figures. It's just, no, we're not doing that anymore. We are on to a new step, a new movement. Black Lives Matter, period. There's just nothing else really to say about that. I so appreciate both of your perspectives and your input, and for joining and sharing. I know that is scary sometimes to be this vulnerable. So thank you both so much for joining me. And for everyone watching, I am looking forward to the next episode, and I hope that you join. See ya.